Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of The Dark Parade. As we have been working our way through the Night of the Demons films, we find ourselves washed up on the shores of Night of the Demons 3, the last of the original trilogy, and joining me for that will be Derek Bourgeois, so we will get to that in just a moment. Want to say thank you again for all of the support during this Night of the Demon series. It's been a lot of fun to hear your feedback. If you would like to continue to leave some feedback, please do so. You can find me at Dark Parade Pod on Twitter. You can also find the Facebook group for the Dark Parade, so drop by there. And that tends to have some fairly animated conversations. As well as just a good old-fashioned B-O, at legionpodcasts.com. So, just to give you a heads up, what will be coming soon, next week will be the end of our look at the Night of the Demon series with a detour into the Night of the Demons remake. Following that, we've got a whole new series, but I'll talk about that then. There will also be this very week a new episode of Whatcha Watching with Jamie and Bo, as well as probably a found footage full either this week or next week, more likely next week. But we'll let next week take care of itself. First, ladies and germs, is my conversation with Derek Bourgeois all about Night of the Demons 3, a movie that perhaps does not live up to the high standards of the first two. You be the judge. So, without further ado, here is that conversation. And welcome, as always, to the Dark Parade. All right, and as promised, everyone, with me is the sexual chocolate. I don't even know what that means. Derek Bourgeois. Longtime pal of various shows that I've done. And is this is the first time you're on Dark Parade, right? Or am I forgetting something? Which is entirely possible.
I was going to do my Night of the Demons voice for the intro.
Oh, please do.
Yes, it is, Bo. It's my first time on the Dark Parade.
Oh, that's pretty good. I think Frank Welker did that for the first movie. And then I think other people did it since, but
actually, fun fact: it's actually one of a staple of Kenny actors. It was the Asian dude that was in the scene with Linnea Quigley at the supermarket. He was the guy behind the counter. Oh, no kidding! Yeah, he was in Witchboard as well. That guy. He did all the demon voices for, I believe. Maybe the first. He might have did this one, too. I'm not sure. Well, all right. Obviously, what we're talking about here is the third and final film in the original Night of the Demons trilogy. Night of the Demons 3, Demon Harder. And this is the first one that was like a straight-to-video special where they were like, look, we're not fucking around with the theatrical release anymore. And if people have listened to the first two episodes of this, I'm a big fan of the second one in particular. I think the first one is like head and shoulders above most of the B-movie stuff of that era. And then I think Night of the Demons 2 is legit fun because it kind of expands on everything that made the first one pretty fun. Mm-hmm. And then we have what I like to think of as the Great Retraction with Night of the Demons 3, where the thing that was kind of fun about Night of the Demons 2 is like you're going to the St. Rita's Academy, and then you're going to Hull House, and then you're going back to the Academy, and then back to Hull House, and there's a wide cast of characters, and they're all very different. You got priests and nuns and the teenagers and a kid into demonology and a guy bouncing his own head like a basketball, all kinds of wacky shit. Don't forget, it has an immortal nun that gets decapitated and fucking her head grows back.
Yeah, like a lizard. And but in this one, we're scaling everything back quite a bit.
Yeah. So
for sure.
so let's just kind of jump into what happens in this movie, and then we'll talk about all this. And for those who are not a regular listener, we're not going to go scene by scene. We're going to kind of give a general idea of what's happening here in a rough chronological order. But we open as we normally do. Like the second one had this with the traveling religious folk, and we have another kind of cold open here, except this time it is Officer Larry.
Played by Larry Day.
Yeah, so he wouldn't forget his name. And it's Halloween night, and he's on duty at Hull House. And the idea is, like, he's gonna, because of the murders that happened with St. Rita's Academy, he's gonna be hanging out to make sure that nobody cruises by and screws with stuff at Hull House. But then he sees some lights on inside and whatnot, and goes inside to investigate. And sure enough, there's Angela, continued to be played by Amelia Kincaid. And and right off the bat, he's like, "Hey, you can't be in here because this place is off limits." And she's like, "What are you talking about? I live here." And to me, that is the first time that he should be like, "Oh, you're probably a ghost or something. Well, I'm gonna go."
Yeah, it's fucking, like, and he's like, he's like, "But I'm the law."
Oh yeah, and she ends up taking his badge off and throwing it at him like a shuriken.
But bam.
Yeah, and kills Officer Larry with that, and then thus begins Night of the Demons 3. Which has, in its opening credit sequence, the shoddiest computer graphics maybe of all time.
Was that what I thought it was like a mixture of stop motion in the beginning, but then it was like, oh, no.
It doesn't look great, which I can kind of forgive, but when they just start recycling the same crappy shots that you saw like 12 seconds before, and they just kind of loop the video until the credits are done, it's like, ugh, okay, nobody really cared about this movie, I guess.
Yeah, and it's even sadder when they have like the shitty version of the original theme playing over it. It's like a lazy version of the original Night of the Demons score. It's like, whoa, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, and we were kind of talking about this before we jumped in, but just to give the bona fides of this is directed by a guy named Jim Kaufman, who did a bunch of television work, but the script is written by Kevin Tenney, who of course directed the first one, didn't write the first one, but directed it. And when my copy of it, at least, look, the first two have Blu-ray releases, this one doesn't. So I got a DVD of it, which only has a 4:3 version of it, and that may be the only version that exists. I don't know if there is a widescreen version of this film, at least not that I could find.
Yeah, this movie influenced Zack Snyder.
Yeah, right. It's the Justice League of
Night of
the Demons movies. But yeah, so we end up jumping into a van with a group of ne'er-do-well teenagers, led by a guy named Vince, who is kind of the main thug, and his girlfriend Lois, who is just all up on him all the time. Like, the only defining character of Lois in this movie is that she's horny nonstop.
And she likes to do puppet snakes.
Right. And, like, the first two movies are horny. This may be the horniest of the movies.
Oh, yeah. Even Angela in some scenes in this is like, I want to fuck the shit out of this nerdy kid.
Yeah, right? All right, so you've got them. Then there's Nick, who is sort of for lack of a better comparison, sort of the John Travolta type. He's kind of...
He does kind of look like John Travolta.
Yeah, it's just a real, like, hey, oh. He's just kind of a greaser guy. And then there's Reggie. And Reggie is just the other dude who is soon to be shot.
Stereotypical black guy.
Yeah, stereotypical black character for these movies. And then finally you have Orson, who is not the guy that Mork from Mork reports to, but is instead kind of all the ne'er-do-wells in this van, he's the one that they all kind of bully a little bit, but he also owns the van.
Yeah.
And so anyway, they're out on a Halloween night just up to no good. And,
yeah, they're looking for girls.
Right. Well, everybody except for Vince, who is, has Lois in his lap. And then we meet Holly and Abby.
Yep.
And Holly is kind of the good-looking cheerleader type. And then there's her friend Abby, who is dressed up like a cat. Where Holly is dressed up like a harem girl. And this is one of those situations where they're like, oh, Abby is kind of the less good-looking friend. And it's like, these girls are both super cute.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that one of the... I don't know that I would find one of them more attractive than the other if I were in high school. Although, given my demeanor, I would probably be a little more attracted to Abby than Holly.
Oh, I would definitely be in a human centipede with both of them if I had the chance.
Sure. The sandwich of that human centipede?
Yes.
Which might be mixing metaphors, but whatever. But yeah, so it's one of those things where Abby's like, oh, I guess I'm just not as good looking as you. And you're like, you're both like 18 years old and gorgeous. What? I don't understand any of this.
I think it was because she was kind of like upsizing, because they had like this weird like nude scene too, where they're like undressing in their room, and it's like she's looking at Holly's tits, and she's like, "Oh, my tits are kind of flat." It's typical girl stuff. Girls do that,
right? But she's not that flat chested either. I mean, like maybe Holly has a bigger cup size or whatever, but neither one of them are like. Anyway, it's just one of those like, oh my god, she takes off the glasses and she's pretty kind of things. Where I'm like, this doesn't work. Both of these girls are way too good looking for one of them to be the ugly one.
Yeah, it's like casting fucking Chloe Grace Moretz as Carrie.
Yeah, yes. Where you're like, this does not compute because nobody would pick on Chloe Grace Moretz because she's too attractive. No matter how crazy and religious she is, she's still a beautiful young woman.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they're going to the dance, and Abby, who is in theory kind of the nerdy one because she's talking about, graduating and going off to college and everything, but she's also like, I'm definitely going to get fucked tonight.
Yes.
So they're horny too, and they take off for the high school dance. And then their car breaks down by the side of the road, and then along comes the van with our ne'er-do-wells, and they're like, hey, you want us to take you for help or something?
Yeah, come on, let's go get some help. We were just getting bored doing your mama jokes for like 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah, they're playing The Dozens, is how they put it, which every time I think of The Dozens, I think of the George Carlin bit from one of his early albums, like AM/FM or something.
Yeah.
When he says, you want to play The Dozens is a game, but the way I fuck your mama is a goddamn shame. It's pretty good.
It is.
Or rest in power, George Carlin. But yeah, so Nick and Holly had an algebra class together. And she's like, oh, I think I know you. And he's like, oh, I must have made some kind of impression because I was only there for the first day. Oh. And you're like, okay, these two are going to end up together, which is unfortunate because I don't really like either of them.
Yeah.
But So now that we have all of these kids together, they make a pit stop at a convenience store. And Reggie is trying to buy some beer on a fake ID. And the guy behind the counter is like, this is 100% not you in this picture. And the guy's like, hey, what are you talking about? That's definitely me. Are you going to sell me the beer or not? And the guy's like, absolutely not. I'm definitely not going to do that. And the guy ends up pulling a gun on Reggie.
Black Lives Matters.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you're like, this really jumped a notch. And so tempers are flaring. Vince grabs the gun out of the hands of this guy behind the counter. But as that's going down, a couple of cops stroll in. And while Vince is holding this gun, is like, all right, everybody be cool. You know, just we're going to wait till these cops pass by and then we're going to get out of there. The guy working the store makes a move on him. And Vince ends up firing, which shoots one of the cops. And then Reggie gets shot by one of the cops once they start returning fire. And so it's just a really low rent kind of shootout in this convenience store. But at the end of the day, what ends up happening is Reggie gets shot in the gut, and the rest of them take off in the van, and the cop gets off a couple of shots at the van and hits the gas tank so that they're leaking gas.
Yeah, they don't have enough time. They're running out of fuel and time and to hide.
Right. So, and that's the whole situation, is they are trying to hide from the cops so that they don't get taken to jail. And Holly and Abby, meanwhile, are like, holy shit, what is going on? Like, we just needed a ride, and the next thing we know, we're accessories to potentially murder?
Yeah, they're all natural born killers now with Mickey and Mallory, aka Vince and Lois.
Yeah, like Lois, by the way, completely getting off on this.
Yes.
She thinks this is great. Vince is, now that things have popped off, Vince is definitely just embracing his life as a criminal on the run.
Yeah.
And so Orson, by the way, has stolen one of the police officer's guns. So that'll come into play later, but he doesn't tell anybody right away. And all right, but the cop that they shot, it turns out that he was wearing a bulletproof vest, so none of the cops, other than not the guy who got shot by the shotgun, who is totally fine. The other cop has a flesh wound in his shoulder, but everybody's okay. Like, nobody is actually dead from this encounter.
Yeah.
And enter Lieutenant Dewhurst, our sort of hero cop of the movie.
We were saying off air too, like, yeah, you could definitely tell Kevin Tenney wrote this one, because if anybody's ever seen Witchboard, he loves to put cops that are obsessed with magic in his movies.
Yeah, well, I think I made the joke also. This is a real copy-paste kind of script for Kevin Tenney, because it just becomes like a Nightmare on Elm Street sequel at a certain point.
It does.
Which isn't bad, and in fact, my favorite parts of the movie is that stuff, but it's also real cheap. But anyway, so this guy Dewhurst watches the security footage, and is like, wait a second, they didn't steal any money, which is what the guy behind the counter is like, oh yeah, they held me up and took all the money out of the cash register. And Dewhurst is like, all right, I like magic because this is a Kevin Tenney movie. And so we're going to play a little game where we're going to do a magic trick, you and I, where you're going to make all of the money that you said was stolen reappear. And the guy's like, I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, yeah. I'm going to turn this place over and search you and this place and if I find the money, you're gonna go to jail. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I guess, here's the money or whatever. And Dewhurst realizes that the van is leaking gas, and so he's kind of sympathetic to what happened with these kids, which seems kind of strange because he has no real reason to be sympathetic other than he's about to retire. That's the thing, he's about to retire at midnight. And I don't know. I don't know why knee-jerk he's like, oh, well, these kids are, some of them, sure. But Vince, he would be like, this is a dangerous dude, and we need to catch him quickly.
Yeah, I think it has to do with, what these cops would do if they did catch them, though, too, because they seem like, oh, we're gonna fucking fuck these people, these kids up, I think he just wanted to make sure that they got arrested safely without getting more harmed.
Yes, you're right. The other cops are like, I swear to God, if we see these kids, we're gonna shoot first and ask questions later. He's like, whoa, these are high school kids, and they're like, we don't care. They try to shotgun down my partner over here, and which isn't wrong, but it's also like, some of these kids are clearly not the vicious killers that Vince might be.
Yeah.
But so back to our van, we realize like Vince is the one who's like, hey, this gas tank is almost empty. And they figure out, one of the cops must have hit the gas tank, so we need to figure out a place to hide very fast, and there's really nothing around here. Except, of course, Derek, for Hull House. Yeah, and Abby, who is the exposition of the movie, is like, we can't do that because that place is possessed, and as soon as we cross the underground stream that surrounds Hull House, then we're in the domain of these demons, and we can't go. Because as soon as we go, we're fucked.
Mm-hmm.
But Vince, because he's got a gun in hand, is like, hey, we're going. If you don't want to go to Hull House, the other option is I will shoot you.
Damn.
Right. So, sure enough, the van crosses over the invisible stream.
The Stargate.
Yeah, it is. It's a total like computer effect as it bends reality as it crosses the threshold of the gate, and now they are at Hull House, and they go inside. Abby, of course, is freaked out more than anyone because she's like, we should not be here. This is all bad news. And Vince is like, hey, if any demons are here, come out. And he's like popping off some shots inside the inside the house, kind of challenging the house to show itself. And sure enough, up comes Angela, who is at first not looking crazy, but is like, oh, I live here at Hull House. And Orson then is like reveals that he's got this revolver, and he's like, hey, Vince, you I can watch everybody else while he and Angela make sure that nobody else is in the house. It's Angela, Nick, Lois, and Vince. Those four are gonna go make sure that the rest of the house is empty. He's gonna watch Holly and Abby.
Mm-hmm.
And Reggie, who is, gut shot. And then we get our, traditional Night of the Demons. Angela does a dance scene.
Oh, yeah. How old was she when she did this movie?
I don't... hang on a second, and we'll get to the bottom of this. Let's see. This came out in 97... So she would have been 34.
Oh, yeah. Hot MILF.
Yeah. and all 5.5 feet of her starts to do her sexy dance. And so while she's doing this dance, like, Orson gets all hypnotized by her sexy dance, and Abby and Holly are like, we need to get out of here while he's not paying attention to us. So they're gonna grab Reggie and get out of there. And so Holly, Reggie, and Abby are in the van, but then Holly fucks all this up by saying, oh, Nick is still inside, and it turns out I kind of do like this guy, and I want to go get rid of, like, I want to go help him out of this place, which is the dumbest possible idea. Like, he was there to begin with. He's part of the gang. They need to get the fuck out.
Yeah.
But instead, Angela, while she is doing her sexy dance from Orson, is like, is there anything that you want? And he says, it's a callback to a line he had earlier about wanting a girl that can suck a golf ball through a garden hose.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, well, I can't do that, but... And then she sucks the bullets out of his gun. And so she starts making out with Orson, and then her demon tongue shoots out the back of his head like Alien.
I was thinking more like Species.
Or, yeah, Species also, for sure. Yeah. And back upstairs, Nick is trying to grab the shotgun and get out of there because Vince and Lois are too horny not to make out in this place.
Yeah, they're like legit like dry humping.
Yeah. And then they realize that he's trying to take the gun, and Vince gets the gun away from him, takes a shot at Nick, but doesn't hit him. And outside, Holly then hears this gunshot. And while she is on her way inside, she hears the police radio from Officer Larry's car and finds that. And then Abby tells Reggie, again, who is gut shot and bleeding to death, is like, oh, I'm going to go check on Holly. And he's like, what? Like, you're going to leave me alone in this van bleeding? And she's like, yeah, I'll be back in a little bit. And so I think, Abby, I think, aside from Orson, is kind of the first to go. Because Orson's dead, but he'll be back in a minute with his devil mask.
It's pretty cougar look, yeah.
Yeah. And then Abby, in her cat Halloween costume, her sexy cat costume, ends up running into Angela, and Angela kind of gives her the same speech that Jerry Dandridge gives Evil Ed. Where she's like, hey, do you want to be the girl that always lives in Holly's shadow, or I can help you and make you irresistible? And she's like, well, I guess so. And so Angela kisses her, like gives her some tongue, but doesn't blow out the back of her skull like she did Orson. And then Abby's like, no, I don't want it. I changed my mind. She's like, too late. You're possessed now.
You're possessed now.
Exactly. So then we leave them. We don't see exactly what happens to Abby, but we'll get back to her in a few minutes. And so then there's Reggie, who hears his name being called, and then he climbs out of the van, and only to find Orson, who is now all demon-faced and has gotten apparently the keys to the police car, and he just runs over Reggie.
R.I.P.
Yeah, poor guy. And so then Vince goes to look to see what happened because he hears the crash. And so he heads out and runs into Abby. who is like her hair.
Sexified.
Yeah, her hair's all teased out, and her costume has now turned into garters and shit. So she's all sexied out, like you said. And he's like, "What got into you?" And she's like, "You know, I'm the perfect woman for you now, Vince." And she starts making out with him. And then does she bite him or something? He ends up slapping her. I can't remember why.
No, they just fuck.
Oh, that's right. They straight up fuck in this scene. And but during the course of this, Abby scratches Vince, which if you have ever watched any of these movies, you kind of know that's part of, like, if you get injured by these things. Although in this movie they kind of changed the rules up a little bit, but that's how I always assumed it went. And so Vince takes off because he gets freaked out by Abby being super sexy. And then he gets chased by Angela. And then, but Lois ends up left alone in the house with only a snake puppet on her hand. And Angela, no, I don't think Angela even comes in the scene, right? Like all of a sudden,
no, she gets left in the barn with Abby, and Abby's like, "Yeah, I fucked your boy, man." You know, she's like, "You a slut."
Yeah.
And then she slaps her, and she becomes Ron Perlman in Beastmaster.
That's right. Abby becomes a Catwoman.
Yeah.
Which, that's kind of one of the differences between this and the other movies. Like, in the other films, when you became a demon, you just got, like, the demon teeth and the demon eyes, and you were, you know, you had blemishes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Whereas in this movie, you become sort of this monstrous version of yourself.
Yeah, Angela got bored. She's like, I'm going to have some fun this year.
Mixing it up.
Yeah.
Which is why it feels very Elm Street sequel to me. Like, Abby was the shy, reserved girl, but then she becomes the sexy, confident Catwoman. Which I think maybe the reason it reminds me of this is because of is it Elm Street 4 with the cockroach lady?
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me of that scene.
Yeah. So I think that's why it reminds me of an Elm Street movie. But
all I needed was Angela eating a meatball full of souls.
Oh my god. You know, I know a lot of people defend those Elm Street movies, and there is a world in which here on the Dark Parade we will do those Elm Street movies one day. I'm just in no hurry to do it because there are other movies that I want to talk about, and also there are exactly 2.5 good Elm Street movies.
Yeah. Maybe like 3.5 for me, but yeah, it's tough.
I mean, there's more bad than good.
Yeah, well, at least some of the bad are still watchable, in my opinion.
Yeah, but it just becomes the same thing of like, oh, whatever the personal foible is, like whatever it is that is your big personality flaw, that is the thing that is your undoing.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's kind of what this movie does too. Like, you know, with Abby and then Lois here, where she's got this snake puppet on her hand, which turns into a giant snake face.
Yeah, and the first thing I thought was like, Kevin Tenney fucking ripped off The Curse Part 2.
I don't know if I've ever seen The Curse Part 2.
Pretty much what happens in that movie is there's this genetic mutation thing where this guy gets bit by a snake dog that bites his hand, and his hand ends up turning into a snake.
I might need to see The Curse Part 2 now.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I think is the moral of the story.
It's actually fun.
So, but yeah, so this snake head is now attached to her arm, and she's freaked out at first, but then she starts rubbing herself, and by rubbing herself, I mean her vagina, with the snake head. And so she starts to get off on it.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess, again, if we're doing, character flaws are kind of your undoing, then I guess the deal is that her innate horniness is what leads to her becoming, possessed or whatever.
Yeah.
I guess.
I don't know. After some of these movies, it's like, okay, I could. Whenever it's in supernatural, anyways, okay, whatever.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of I think that's what's happening here, but I think the moral of the story ultimately is that Kevin Tenney wrote a bunch of shit one weekend, and that became this movie.
He was still probably depressed after making Pinocchio's Revenge.
I mean, I would be depressed too.
Yeah, that movie's awful.
That is not a good movie. But yeah, so Holly, who is still not possessed, smashes the window of the police car because she's going to try to call the police on the radio. But then Officer Larry shows up. And he's all possessed now, and he starts chasing her. And then she gets out. She totally gets out. She gets across the underground stream. And when Officer Larry comes after her, he just disintegrates into a bunch of dust or whatever.
Yeah, they totally do a Hell Night right here.
Yeah. But then, like a dum-dum, she's like, well,
Nick!
Yeah, I gotta go find Nick and get everybody, and Abby and all my friends out of the house, because she doesn't know that Abby's all possessed and whatnot. And so she and Nick are now going into the house together. They run afoul of Orson and end up just kind of running away from him and run up to the attic. And so they make out for a second. We get a moment where he's like, hey, you're looking pretty good in that gypsy outfit. How about we make out? And she's good for it.
I loved you since math class, Hey.
Yeah, it's a real, I remembered you from algebra class too. Even though I was only there for one day, but, you made an impression because you were hot.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. And anyway, so they then Orson runs in on him, and Holly ends up throwing lye in his face, which burns him up pretty good, but it distracts him long enough that they can get away from him. And they kind of run smack dab into our retiring cop, Lieutenant Dewhurst, who has shown up. He deduces that they must have gone to Hull House because they were running out of gas, and it's the only place nearby that no cop would search.
Yeah. And he's like, hey, you want to see a magic trick? Come on, I'll show you one. On the way to the station.
The first magic trick is, I'm going to handcuff you.
I love weird Czechoslovakian Raymond Burr so much in this movie.
Yeah, he's genuinely my favorite thing about the movie. So yeah, he takes him outside, kind of marches him to the car, and then out comes Vince, who is still not possessed, but he's got the gun to Angela's head and is like, hey, here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna let me go, or I'm gonna shoot this crazy lady who lives in this abandoned house. And Lieutenant Dewhurst is like, hey, just so you know, that cop that you shot, totally fine. So you haven't killed anybody. And if you want, just put down the gun. I'm not saying you're not going to be in trouble, but you're not. This is all minor infractions at this point. We can all walk away from this. But Angela is like, that pig is lying. You need to shoot him. And
you're right, Angela.
Yeah, he's just like, you're right, crazy lady that I just met. And So he starts shooting at Lieutenant Dewhurst, but Dewhurst is a quick draw sharpshooter.
It's all that magic.
Yeah, that sleight of hand. His magic trick is making a bullet disappear in Vince's eye socket. And once Vince hits the ground, then Angela just fully demons out, along with everyone else, like all the other demons, Abby and Orson, and everybody but Officer Larry, who is disintegrated. And Angela then lays down some new mythology, which is, if you're a demon, or if you're a regular person, to be possessed, you have to willingly give your soul by word or deed. And so that's why, like, you know, Abby wanted to take back her possession, but it turns out, like, a subset of the rules is no backsies. So once you kind of agree, like, either you kiss Angela, or, you know, you behave in a certain way where you're basically saying, I want the demon's help or something. This is all real loosey-goosey and doesn't totally add up within the context of the movie, I think.
It kind of, I think it's when they're alive, because I did notice this kind of in part 1 a little bit more than 2, where, you know, Angela and, you know, Linnea Quigley in that movie were kind of like all into this fucking shit. So of course they're the first two to get fucking possessed, and usually everyone else is either getting killed and shit, or they lust them like they do in part 1. It's similar, but it's a little bit more explained in this one. It's kind of annoying, you know.
Yeah, well, you're making rules that you're not totally following.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, then don't bother making the rule at all, but you need the rules if you're going to do the ending of this movie, which is why this script feels super lazy.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but yeah, so, because Holly is a virgin, Angela, Angela is like, well, if you guys give me the virgin, I'll let the cop and Nick go. And Holly's like, okay, I'll do that. And Angela then turns Vince into a demon. And she's like, you know, okay, my children, maybe you should do it.
Okay, my children, let's go party.
Yeah, and so she basically tells everybody to go back inside. And then Nick is like, hey, I got another idea. How about you create a diversion, huh?
Oh, why, you asked the right person.
Right. I wonder how she likes card tricks. And that's kind of what happens, is he's just doing a little, like, you know, close-up street magic with her.
He's like, look at this, hocus pocus. He even says hocus pocus.
He absolutely does. And while Angela is watching that, Nick stabs her with a switchblade. And then that doesn't kill her, so they take the police car and ram Angela against the tree a handful of times. And that doesn't kill her either, because, you know, she's a demon. And Angela then goes into the house as the sun starts to rise. And so Nick and Holly and the lieutenant are making their way towards this gate. And Nick, he tells Nick and Holly, like, hey, FYI, you guys are in the clear, because I saw the security footage and you're not on it. And so no one will ever know that you were part of this whole, you know, gas station convenience store thing. But before they can cross over the threshold...
Fatality.
Right. Finish him. Yeah. Angela reaches into the lieutenant's chest and yanks his heart out. And then she starts chasing Nick and Holly. But they get across the stream with Nick, like Angela. They're kind of playing tug of war with Holly, with Angela grabbing her arm and Nick's got her other arm, and they're trying to pull, or he's trying to pull Holly over the finish line essentially, and Angela ends up dissolving like Officer Larry did.
Yeah.
And then they kind of set up a sequel to this at this point, because like Angela in theory is all disintegrated, all the other demons are taken care of, you know, one presumes, and Holly ends up making this homemade cross.
We have to come here every year. I'm like, whoa. That's some commitment.
Well, yeah, she's like, I'm gonna come back here every Halloween and
Why don't they just fucking burn this place down?
Right, like, just blow it up. You know? Like, why come back every... Also, why do... Like, you don't owe any of the people inside anything. You know, Abby's dead. I'm sorry, your friend is dead. But she's gone. Like, she turned into an evil Catwoman.
She turned into Ron Perlman.
She turned into the Beast from Beauty and the Beast. And, although sexy. Well, but I guess all the women thought he was sexy, too. But she's gone. You got out with the guy. You need to go away and never come back.
Or at least just burn it down if you're going to get that committed.
Right. Yeah, or go about the business of, like, getting a priest and that kind of thing. But anyway, so she says, I'm going to make sure no one ever goes inside that place again. And they take off. And then the very last shot of the movie is lights turning on in the house. And you hear Angela laughing and says, Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Yeah, which I kind of like. I like the fact that the movie is goofy enough to be like, hey, happy Halloween, everybody that watched Night of the Demons 3. But also, boy, it would have been so much better if Night of the Demons 3 had been, you know, more worth watching.
Yeah.
So, anywho, that's the story of Night of the Demons 3 in all its glory. And that takes us, Derek, to part 2 of our discussion, which is, are there any performances that you want to highlight here from the cast, other than, like, I'll do the easy one here, which is Amelia Kincaid as Angela is still pretty good in this role. Like, she's clearly having a good time with it. Yeah,
she's like the one that's usually having the most fun in this role, and, you know, she makes it her own. And even in this one, you know, she's a little bit older, you know, she ages from movie to movie, but she's still having fun with the role, you know, doing that prosthetic makeup, even though, like, yeah, spoiler alert, they did use some scenes from the first movie when she's like floating down the hallway in some scenes for this. But yeah, it's a blast in that sense with like her performance. And even though how hokey the fucking magician obsessed cop was, he was pretty fun too. I kind of liked him in the movie too. Everyone else, it felt weird because when I was watching this, I'm like, are these people fucking dubbed? You can tell there's some like bad ADR in this movie in some scenes.
Yeah, for sure. I do like, the guy's name is Vlasta Vrana, is the guy who plays Lieutenant Dewhurst, and I agree with you. I think he is totally fine.
Yeah.
He seems to be like, he's a legitimately decent actor, and I'll even give it to Patricia Rodriguez, who plays Abby, because I think the scenes with her and Angela are pretty good, you know, where she's like, no, I didn't really want this. I think that stuff works pretty well.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
But I kind of think everyone else in the movie is not very good.
Especially when you have Vince and Orson, and they kind of look alike, too. It's kind of weird. I'm like, it would have made more sense if they actually made these two brothers.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, he's trying to show his older brother maybe that he's as hard as he is, you know, in that sense. That would have made the story more interesting because they kind of look alike too. It's weird.
Yeah, yeah, they do look alike. I hadn't really thought about that before, but they really do. But yeah, it's kind of unfortunate because, especially coming off of Night of the Demons 2, where you actually have some pretty good character actors in that movie.
Yeah, it's a Brian Trenchard Smith joint.
Yeah, it's legitimately fun, and all the performances in it are, you know, they're certainly kind of arch and they're playing big and all that, but they're good. You know, like Merle Kennedy as Mouse is really good, and Zoe Trilling, and like a lot of really fun performances in that movie. And in this one, you're kind of panning for gold a little bit, where it's not great. There are a couple of good performances, like I said, especially from Amelia Kincaid, who is a veteran at this point, but everyone, like all the kids in the movie in particular, are kind of bad.
Yeah. And actually, might be weird. I actually watched Night of the Demons 2 for the first time this year, and there's a reason because of that. It's because I watched this one first.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh, because it was kind of like that Basket Case thing where I watched Basket Case 3. I'm like, I don't think I need to watch Basket Case 2 now.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely... depending on how you want to look at it, like I said, I'm probably more of a fan of 2 than I am the original Night of the Demons, but both of those are totally legitimate movies.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. You know, 2's fun. You know, Night of the Demons 1's actually a very nostalgic movie for me, so it's still a little over 2 for me, but overall, I think 2's pretty great. You know?
Yeah, I totally agree. So, you know, performances, overall not great, which brings us to stage 3 of the conversation, which is, you know, sort of what are the underlying themes of the movie? What is it trying to say? And with kind of
97 was horny. That's what it's...
Yeah, I mean, aside from the horniness of the movie, I think it does play a little bit on that Elm Street stuff that we were talking about, of like whatever your deepest insecurity is, that is ultimately your undoing. And I mean, that's as close as I come to any statement that the movie is trying to make.
Yeah, it's not really trying to make really a big statement. Like, you could say like because it's kind of a carbon copy of the first movie too, in that sense. It's a lazier version, you know.
Yeah.
You know, it's like paint by numbers. He borrows from a lot of other fucking movies, even his own fucking movies, you know. But the script, it's very lazy. It's very 90s, late 90s horror in that sense, where, yeah, especially with these direct-to-video 90s horror movies, you get a lot of shit, but sometimes you get some gems out of them too. But this one was, it's still kind of watchable in my eyes with some of the story elements, but I've seen worse from this time period.
Yeah, I mean, and that this kind of brings us to our final thoughts here, but yeah, I agree with you. It's not the worst movie that I've seen from like this 90s era of B movies, like straight to DVD horror films, but it's just such a bummer because the first
Night of the Demons 3.
Yeah, I mean, the first one is what it is, and it's kind of this minor classic because of Linnea Quigley, and it you know, I've said it on every episode so far, but I'll repeat it again here. The lighting and the cinematography of Night of the Demons is legit really good.
Oh, yeah, and plus that fucking opening fucking credit sequence. Oh.
Yeah, it's like all of that stuff is really good. There's a reason that people kind of revere Night of the Demons, and Night of the Demons 2 expands on all that stuff in a lot of really interesting ways, and you have this like really rad snake demon thing at the end, and
Angela Snake.
All that stuff is really cool and it's really fun. And does it make perfect sense? No, but that's not what you need out of these movies. And even as I've been kind of nitpicking about some of the mechanics of the plot of this movie, you know, you can forgive all that stuff if the characters are fun and you're laughing and it's kind of sexy and it's a little sleazy and all that stuff. But this just feels so cheap compared to those other movies that it's just such an afterthought. It's just so like bargain basement for a Night of the Demon sequel. And there's part of me that likes the fact that it embraces how schlocky it is.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that all these kids end up at Hull House as a result of this robbery gone bad. But it's just so clunky in its direction. And again, maybe it's just because the only way you can watch this movie is 4:3 on a DVD. But it just looks kind of like trash too, which is a bummer because the other two movies at least look good, and this does not.
Yeah, like I said, like I'm not the one that usually bitches about ADR movies because I watch a lot of those Italian movies where they're ADR as fuck. So just for throwing that out there, but with like some of these other movies, like, oh okay, they redubbed this. In the scene, it's just you notice it because you watch, like, you and me watch Godzilla movies that are dubbed terribly,
Yeah, but there's so much more charming about those movies than this. Like, I mean, those you kind of, maybe it's just because that's kind of baked in with a Godzilla film, is that there's going to be a lot of bad dubbing, but this is. Like, hey, this was 1997. Like, we knew how to dub a movie, and none of these actors are foreign.
Yeah.
I guess Canadian, but...
Hey.
Yeah, it's just a real bummer. Any other final thoughts on this one?
I liked it a little bit more than when I first seen it. But overall, I still feel the same about it. It's... a very, very huge step down.
Yeah. All right. Well, that brings us to the final point of contention here in the episode, which is a rating. As always, you can rate from 1 to 5 stars. Half stars are allowed, but no quarter stars because we are not monsters. So where does this land for you on the rating scale?
You said out of 5, right?
That's right.
I give it 2.5 hocus pocuses out of 5.
Well done. I'm a little harder on this movie, I think. I'm gonna go with 2 stars because to me, like, 2.5 is average, and I think this is just a hair below average. Like, if somebody asked me if I recommended it, I think I would have to tell them, like, you're better off going back and watching 2 or 1 for that matter. Those are going to be a better time. And this, if you're a completist like me and you just can't not watch the entire series, it's just you said it yourself, like, this is just a big step down. And that's unfortunate because I really think that, especially after 2, the Night of the Demon series could have been, not necessarily great, but it could have, like, lived in that subspecies realm or something where it's like, all of these movies are they're not great, but they're all kind of fun.
I would take any of the subspecies over Night of the Demons 3.
Right, exactly my point.
Yeah.
Exactly my point. And at some point, we will do that series on this show. Because that's the kind of dum-dum I am, is that I will watch all of those and try to mine some kind of information out of it.
Radu's my homie.
Man, I really enjoy those. Again, this is not the time nor the place to talk about all the subspecies movies, but I have a lot of time for those. Even as the sequels go on and get increasingly ridiculous, that's when I kind of love it most.
Hell yeah.
All right, so we wrap up every episode with 3 things that you may not know about the film that we're watching, and in this case, three things you may not know about Night of the Demons 3. This is more trivia because it's kind of tough to find information about this movie. Like, there's no director's commentary on the DVD or anything. There's no like hard-hitting investigative articles about what was going on set or anything. So bear with me, ladies and jelly spoons, as we give you some perhaps less than stellar trivia, but it's what I got my hands on. For example, Angela's name not once spoken in the movie.
Yeah, I didn't notice that, but you're right.
So that is one thing you may not have realized about this movie. Number 2, when they're in the convenience store, you can see a VHS copy of Night of the Demons on one of the shelves.
Multiverse.
Yeah, that's right. It's meta. And the other thing you may not know, which is, I think, the most interesting of the things you may not know about this movie, this was the last movie that Amelia Kincaid did, at which point she became an animal psychic, which is something that we talked about, but what you may further not know is that after becoming an animal psychic, she was the only psychic ever to be invited to Buckingham Palace to psychically attune to the horses of Queen Elizabeth.
Huh.
Yeah.
She's come a long way from doing Stray Cat videos.
Absolutely. Like, she's gone on to do she's part of some nonprofit, or started a nonprofit about wildlife education and stuff like that. Like, Amelia Kincaid seems to have done just fine for herself. And
yeah, she's related to one of the Golden Girls too.
Rue McClanahan, I think, is
Yeah,
her aunt
right.
or something. Yeah. So, yeah, that's cool. But, yeah, it's kind of a bummer this was her last movie, because she has a really fun presence on screen. But sounds like she went off to do work that she loved, and, bless her for it. So,
Yeah, if you didn't own the Blu-ray for the original Night of the Demons at Scream Factory, but there's actually a really long interview with her. That's she still has fond memories of these movies that she did.
Yeah, and I think that she's pretty quick to say that the second one was her favorite to do.
Yeah.
Because it gave her a little bit more to do than the first one did, and even with all the makeup, I'm sure that was a nightmare. Especially the Angela snake was probably a real pain. But she seemed to have fun with it, and that's, what more can you ask for out of a performer? Is like, she did a good job, and she seemed to have a good time doing it. So it's a shame she wasn't in more stuff, but such is life. Well, that is it. That concludes the original trilogy of the Night of the Demons movies. And so, Derek, now it is time to put the spotlight on you, and to ask, where can possessed and non-possessed alike find you on podcasts, or in neighborhoods, lurking about in windows? Where can you be found?
Sure, you could find me on Cinema Attack, where you could just find me on most podcatchers. We are hosted on Anchor through that podcast. You could also find me on They're Here, where you can find that under the Cut to the Chase feed, which is also on Anchor, I believe. Fun show. We're actually planning our next episode soon, so that should be out soon. We also have No More Room in Hell, the original show. We also have No More Room in Hell Presents Creature Comforts. We also have what's the other show I do? We have a show that's been recorded. It hasn't been released yet. Underwater Kaiju from Outer Space actually recorded an episode on Gamera versus Barogon, and don't know when it's going to be released, but hopefully soon.
It exists. It is a show that exists.
Yeah, we came. It's our comeback, but it's not out yet. Yeah. But that's about it for me. You know, I have some other things I have to finish editing to release, so I'll start announcing those more when they get released. I know Bo is part of one of the shows, but yeah, I gotta actually start working on those, so we'll do that soon.
Excellent, man. All right, well, thanks as always for doing this, buddy. I appreciate it as ever, and I'll be right back to close out the show.
So, folks, there you have it. Big thanks once more to Derek Bourgeois for joining me to talk about this movie. One can only describe as a lesser entry in the Night of the Demons franchise. But it was fun to have that conversation, and you could probably tell our tone with it was a bit silly, which is kind of what the movie deserves. Anyway, we'll be back next week with an episode all about the Night of the Demons remake, starring Eddie Furlong and Shannon Elizabeth and Diora Baird and a bevy of on-screen beauties as well as Eddie Furlong. Until then, like I said, you'll be getting a Whatcha Watching at the end of this week. Next week, there should be some found footage Fool waiting for you. And if you are listening to this, the coming weekend will not have a